learning to connect to my felt sense and have access to my internal communication system has been like scuba diving, like going deeper and uncovering a rich, colorful, and very much alive world I only knew existed through books and pictures.
I don't like to argue, so I say nothing and fume for days.
How do I set boundaries without sounding like a jerk?
I hate the idea that I might accidentally offend somebody, so sometimes I'd just rather say nothing at all.
Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, and thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra Siroka, a transformative communication teacher and coach who's devoted to helping multicultural individuals and couples on the path of transformation transform their lives and relationships through conscious communication. Thank you so much for being here. This is your space to learn and to remember to connect to your capacity to show up with your communication as the conscious, mature adult you are. If you listened to last week's episode 112, I shared with you that episode was the first one of a series about communication self-reflection. In that episode, I talked about your internal communication system and the felt sense of experiences in your physical body that lets you know what's happening with you. Today, in this episode, I am going to talk about how to access your internal communication system, and I am going to share with you about some things that I have been able to communicate as a result of becoming very intimate with my internal communication system. Now, if you haven't listened to episode 112, I recommend you listen to that episode first and then come back to this episode, or else this episode may not be as useful to you without the foundational understanding of your internal communication system. If you've already listened to episode 112, then you are ready to take the step to reconnect to your internal communication system. I will start with a little refresher though. I mentioned that we come to the world with this internal communication system as a way for us to know how we are in the moment. Our internal communication system also tells us if there's anything that needs to be done about it, about what we are experiencing. I also shared with you that it's not that we lost our internal communication system, but rather that we have lost access to it. Kind of like, when you've been hiking and sometimes you encounter these hiking trails in a state park that have not been maintained for a long time. And so in time, they get completely covered up. And if we want to have access to that hiking trail again, then we will need to do some work. The same goes for your communication. If you'd like to communicate skillfully and authentically, if you want to have healthy relationships and thrive no matter what's going on in your life, then you need to do the work to have access to your internal communication system. And I can assure you that it's work worth doing. I had lost access to my internal communication system, and that I had no clue of what my felt sense was or what was happening inside, what kind of experience I was really having inside. Yet, I had wonderful teachers who taught me that there was a felt sense to be explored. And especially my teachers, John and Jennifer Wellwood, taught me not only how to pay attention to my felt sense, but how to understand what my felt sense is communicating to me. As always, I want to be honest with you. It took me several years not only to learn, but also to remember how valuable the information of this internal communication system is and how to keep listening and connecting to it. And because the world around us is not constantly reminding us how to show up in our life and our relationships consciously, I developed a daily practice as part of my meditation in which I connect to the felt sense of my experience in the moment. And I tell myself that I recommit to authenticity, maturity, and presence. So what I'm going to teach you here today is the simple and very powerful practice that I have learned, and hopefully it will bring as much benefit as it has brought to my life and my relationships. Before I teach you how to connect to your felt sense, perhaps you've heard me say before that if you want to communicate authentically and show up as the conscious, compassionate, mature adult you are, you need to be in the present moment. Well, if you don't have access to the felt sense of your experience and you bypass it and go straight to the thinking mind, when you go to the thinking mind without going through the felt sense of your body first, you leave the present moment. Yes, because you go into a story away from this current moment and away from yourself. So you may go into the past or the future. You may make your experience bigger or smaller than it really is. You may dismiss your experience altogether, or you may get confused about your experience. And so when you're trying to communicate about it, your communication is not only not going to be eloquent, but it's likely to be inaccurate because your communication is not going to be about what's happening right now. It is going to be filtered and altered by your thinking mind. So let's talk about what you can do about it, how to come back to the present moment, connect to your felt sense, and be able to communicate authentically. A wonderful way to connect to your felt sense and pay attention to your internal communication system is by asking yourself a question. And the question is, what am I sensing right now? I'm going to say it again. What am I sensing right now? So take a moment, check in with yourself. What are you sensing right now? And if this question doesn't resonate with you, we can make it even more explicit. We can ask ourselves, what am I experiencing in this very moment in my physical body? So, once again, check in with yourself. What are you experiencing in this very moment in your physical body? Check it out. Listen. At first, the language that you may hear may be something as simple as good, bad, okay, something pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, basic language. And then, if you work with me or with someone who can help you understand your felt sense and your internal communication system, you will be able to refine your language and really describe what's going on inside. For me, learning to connect to my felt sense and have access to my internal communication system has been like scuba diving, like going deeper and uncovering a rich, colorful, and very much alive world I only knew existed through books and pictures. Reading about scuba diving on The Lonely Planet or watching a documentary about Jacques Cousteau or looking at pictures of fish is so minimal compared to the experience of watching a giant turtle eat, noticing tiny colorful fish playing hide and seek so close to you inside a rainbow color fresh coral garden, or watching a group of manta rays gracefully glide above your head. When you connect to your felt sense, you are going to discover a very rich world. When I learned to access my internal communication system and get more and more refined in paying attention and listening to my felt sense, I was able to speak up I was able to sometimes understand that I needed to wait and listen more during a difficult conversation. I was able to learn when and how to set boundaries without harming the relationship. I was able to learn to ask for what I needed in a confident way and to have true intimacy, not only with my beloved Matthew, my husband, but also with dear family and friends. I was able to be vulnerable and tell someone that their words were hurting me. I was able to heal relationships. And I'm sharing about me right now because that's my most immediate experience, the one I have learned to know very well. But I can also tell you that when my dear communication coaching clients and students learn to access their internal communication systems and listen to their felt sense, they were able to start, maintain, and repair precious relationships. So once again, do it one more time. What are you sensing right now? What are you experiencing in this very moment in your physical body? If you were to do this at least 3 times a day and ask yourself this question, you'd be on your way to reconnecting to your internal communication system and getting closer and closer to expressing yourself authentically, with clarity, with confidence, and with compassion. I told you this practice is simple, isn't it? And it's not easy. But it's so valuable. And it's so essential if you want to communicate with authenticity. For example, a dear client of mine learned that every time her hands were clammy, it was because she was feeling insecure. This insecurity affected her ability not only to communicate with clarity, to communicate well, but also it affected her voice. She couldn't speak loud enough to be heard. In our work together, she learned to connect to her intrinsic quality of confidence and cultivate the ability to communicate with it and be heard. And then we worked on understanding that every time she had the felt sense of clammy hands, instead of feeling insecure, it was a message from her internal communication system to bring forth that quality of confidence in her words and in her voice. Having this practice allowed her to be more and more authentic, which in turn became crucial not only for her professional career, but also to have the meaningful relationship she wanted to have with her family and with people that she was dating, all because of her ability to learn to connect to, listen to, and understand her felt sense. I hope that by now you are aware about the relationship between your felt sense and your ability to communicate authentically. And remember, it will take time. So practice, practice, practice. You can do it. And now let's recap what you've heard in this episode. Today, I continue talking about your internal communication system, a conversation we started last week with episode 112. In this current episode, I shared with you that connecting to your internal communication system has to do with paying attention to your felt sense, the physical sensation your body is sending to you through your nervous system. And I taught you how to access your internal communication system by asking yourself a question. Finally, I encouraged you several times to be patient. This takes practice, but the benefit is infinite. Paying attention to your felt sense will allow you to be able to communicate authentically as the conscious, compassionate, and mature adult you are. Thank you so much for listening. Until next week, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao! Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.